Charles Mayhew, Industry Process Consultant for Dassault Systems SOLIDWORKS, based in North America. Today I want to discuss with you guys the ability and the options that we have available for storing SOLIDWORKS electrical projects within PDM Professional or even in a single file folder structure. Today I wanted to discuss with you the ins and outs of the SOLIDWORKS electrical application data, where it's stored, what it entails, and then we're going to discuss the options that are built into SOLIDWORKS electrical, which I call the legacy options, which include a link to PDM, base export to folder, and the advanced export to PDM. Use the update PDM button or the controlled workflow with the check-in, check-out buttons. Lastly, we'll discuss the newer release of the SOLIDWORKS electrical PDM integration for PDM Professional, which is an add-in built for PDM Professional that gives us advanced user abilities, advanced controls of saving those projects with variable mapping and data card mapping, and a bill of material inside of PDM. So let's take a look at what we've got in store. So first off, I want to start off with discussing the application data and how it's stored and where it's stored within the application. In most cases, most corporate environments or multi-user environments, what you're going to have is a client-server install. That would have the server with its data and then the workstations, which work as the clients accessing that data. So on the server, typically we have the Microsoft SQL Server. In most instances, it's SQL Express. That includes the databases, so it's got the application data database, it's got manufacturer's parts catalog database, the macros, the projects, and then every project has its own database also. Then we've got an application data folder, which contains all of the library information outside of the SQL database, right? So all of your report configurations, all of your drawing, your title blocks, your symbols, all that type of stuff, templates, all that, even the project folders, archives right there. So, and then also another aspect that's installed on the server is the collaborative server. That is like the traffic cop, manages who has what drawings open within the project, also controls the messaging within the project, all that type of stuff, right? And then typically on the workstations, you have the client installed, which allows you to actually derive and design your schematics and your 2D layouts and that type of stuff, and also your 3D electrical add-in for SOLIDWORKS, right? It's all within that workstation, right? So projects are both SQL base and file folder information, right? So each project has its own database in the SQL Server. I mentioned that before. The application also has application data folder, which I mentioned, which contains your symbols, your title blocks, your configuration files, your report templates, your project templates, and then each project also has a folder in the application data folder. Now, Project SQL database contains the majority of the information for the project, right? Every project, every drawing, wire, component, symbol has an entity inside of that SQL database. The reports and design rules checks are just SQL queries pulling information from that SQL database, right? So then project folder contains all of the inserted symbols, the title blocks, copy of the configuration files used, and a copy of the reports, copy of all that type of stuff, right? And then it may also contain the 3D assemblies and copies of all the inserted parts if your settings are set that way. So they can get large and they contain all the other additional information. All right, so that's kind of the basic rundown. Now, there is one other thing too that you can get, which is project archives and snapshots. They contain a copy of the database and the project folder and all the related items such as the symbols, the title blocks, and configuration files. Okay, so let's take a look at the options we have. The very first option and the most basic is export to folder, right? So within the link to PDM configuration, which is a command inside of the SOLIDWORKS electrical interface, the very basic top one, export the folder, right? So once you set up your settings, you have the ability to specify the folder to export to. It will automatically generate a project archive. It will export the drawings to DWG or DXF. It can also copy the 3D files to there if you wanted to. It'll also generate a PDF if you want it to. And you can also export your reports that are inside of your project. right? And it's just a simple update files for PDM, link to PDM button. It's the same button for everything, even though it's a basic export to folder. It's that same button. And what it does is it, like I said, archives the project. Drawings can be exported to DWG, DXF. PDF export for the project also. Report exports can also. And then the folder to export is specified in the link to PDM configuration. So it's the same folder every single time, and then it creates a subfolder in there for your project based off the variables or properties within your project, right? All exported files are placed in subfolders for each type, right? So the archive will be put in an archive folder, and then drawings will be put in a DWG, DXF will be put in a drawings, the PDF will be put in a PDF. You know, you can specify those in that interface, right? So here's an example of what you get, right? So I checked in the project here. It shows SOLIDWORKS Electrical, the name of the project. Then I've got the archive folder, which actually has the archive, and then the drawings broken up by book, PDF, and reports are all there. So if you have a data management tool that is outside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical, and as long as that tool appears on your hard drive as a file location, such as, you know, update SWE on my E drive, if it's that location, you can check in, or not check in, but you can export the files to that location, go to your utility for that tool and check it in from there, right? So this would be the one way that you can work with SOLIDWORKS PDM standard with the tool, right? Because it will export. You do have to go manually check in everything from that side, from your vault view of standard or from whatever tool you're using, all right? Now, the next option is one that would be considered an advanced option, which is the export to PDM vault. And the first one is use update files for PDM button, right? So what that's going to do is it's a single command to archive and export files to SOLIDWORKS PDM Professional. I'm going to put that in there. It's Professional. And then files generated automatically, right? So it does the same thing. We do a project archive, drawing export, PDF export, and report export, right? And if you look here, there's the formulas that are available, right? Subfolder for projects, so it's going to put it in that location. So it would be your vault, and then projects. And then for the archive or folder, it's going to give it project name, or for the folder, I should say, project name. And then for the archive, will be under archives. For drawings, it would be under drawings, right? So it does create all that stuff for it, for all the subfolders, creating that folder structure. Folders to export is specified in the link to PDM. That's one thing to keep in mind. All exported files are placed in a subfolder for each file type, like I was mentioning. And then the files are checked into the vault after export of files. So it does do the check-in process for you. And that's why it requires PDM Professional, because of that check-in requirement, the API calls. Okay. And if unique static folder and file names are used, files will be versioned, right? Because every time we check in a file inside of PDM Professional, it versions that file, right? So it will version those files upon check-in, right? Files can have PDM revisions set via workflow transitions, but that does not populate back to the projects. So keep that in mind. You know, DWGs and DXFs, they do contain all the symbols and all of the title blocks, and all those are, you know, basically blocks within the DWG or the DXF. So you can get PDM to update that information via variables and variable connection to attributes. So it can do that. Like I said, it just will not back populate into the project. So just keep that in mind. Okay. And then once again, it's just the update files for PDM. So you highlight the project in the project manager, update files for PDM, and gives you the ability to check that in. All right, and this is what it looks like. You'll get your archive project, and then you get all of your folders for your existing ones, right? And then the project, if you look at it, is a TEW zip file, so it is a zip file. So it does list in the preview all of the objects that are part of that, right? Just keep in mind your data cards. You'll have to manually enter the information for data cards, all that type of stuff. Bill of materials do not get generated, any of that stuff, because it is just files saved to the PDM vault, okay? So just keep that in mind. And then the next option, once again, is the use of check-in, check-out buttons, or a controlled workflow. So very similar to the update files for PDM and very similar to the basic export. We get all the same export. The difference is we get a check-in, check-out button on our electrical project manager. So it's going to automatically generate those files. It's going to archive the project, export the drawings, DWG, DXF, or PDF, export the reports. We also do get a specific ePDM bill material reports also, right? So we'll create reports within PDM that have a little more detail that you can set up so that way they always export and have that ability, right? Folder export is specified in the configuration. All export are placed in subfolders again. Very similar. If you notice, like the legacy stuff, it's all basically the same output. It's just the buttons used to put it in and what happens when you click those buttons, right? Same thing, set via workflow for revisions, but does not populate the projects. Now this one, the checked out, does have a PDM status, right? So it does check it out, does say who checks it out. So one thing when you're using the check-in, check-out functionality, whoever checked out that file or that project must check that file back or that project back in, right? So that's a typical PDM workflow. So be cautious if you are using the check-in, check-out functionality and you're using a client server install with everyone using the same SQL server and everyone using the same application data folder, you will have to make sure that whoever checked it out is going to check it back in. All right. And then once again, the outputs are the exact same thing, right? So archive, drawings, PDF, and reports. Okay. Now you do get an additional one, like I mentioned, the eBOM reports or the PDM BOM reports. Those will be put in a separate folder, which will be exported all the time also. Okay. Now, the most recent and probably the most powerful, doesn't quite get what everyone wants, but it gets us closer, is what I call the new SOLIDWORKS electrical PDM integration. It is an add-in for your PDM vault. It requires a separate install. So it does get added to your PDM as an add-in to your PDM vault, right? So it is a SOLIDWORKS electrical integration administration, right? So it does have additional information. We are going to be syncing our libraries. So one word with that is make sure your libraries are not too large. If you have more than 10,000 manufacturer's parts in your library, it will not sync properly. So keep that in mind. Reduce, keep it to a minimum as you get. Okay. So you do get an option with the specific command manager tab inside SOLIDWORKS Electrical for your PDM. You got open, check out, check in, get latest version, get version, search, show, data card, change state, synchronize library, select which vault, right? So you have those abilities. Now, other things that we have, right, is manufacturer's parts and cable library is synced to PDM. And what it does when it syncs is it creates a virtual document of the manufacturer part, right? So if we come look at this, it creates a virtual document for the manufacturer part. Now you can sort your manufacturer's parts how you choose, right? So the folders that it creates, in this particular example, I have it created by classification, right? So it's going to give me buttons and switches, and then all my buttons and switches are under that. You can do it by manufacturer part. You can do it. There's a lot of variables that are available or properties from electrical that you can use to generate the folder names. Okay, so you do have that flexibility and how you choose to see fit, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you are using 3D, you want to make sure that your assemblies and your 3D part files are in your library inside of your vault also, right? So your parts that represent your manufacturer's parts need to be inside of your library, inside of your PDM vault. Your project assembly files will be inside of your PDM vault, not stored inside of the electrical project, but linked to the 3D assemblies inside of the vault, right? So it's availability there. If you map your manufacturer part to a part file, it will continue that mapping also. Okay, so it will retain that mapping for when you do your next step, which is your check-in, right? So when you check in your project, after you've synchronized, the project is archived and export files are stored in the SOLIDWORKS PDM vault. Just like the other options, files are automatically generated. We get our project archive. We get an export of the drawings or DWG and DXF or DWG. We get an export of the PDF if we want. We can have options to do other stuff too. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. We can check in reports. They just have to be done differently. You have to go into your reports within your project, tell it to generate a text file or a Excel spreadsheet and save those to your project, and then add those file types under the file structure up here to check those in also. And then you would get your Excel spreadsheet of your project, right? For me personally, I think that's a wonderful idea because there are exports from electrical that should be revision controlled along with the project, right? So, if you're doing any of your reports today, it's, list of wire tags, list of component tags, like all that stuff should be revision controlled, right? With the project because it follows the project. So if you add them into your project and have them as Excel files in your project, it will export them and check those in also. Okay. One other option here I didn't mention is the folder to export can be user selected at check-in, right? So you have the option up here, right? Always use default root folder. Well, if you uncheck it, it will prompt users to do it, right? We also have an option to remove the project from electrical after check-in. So keeping your electrical project manager cleaned up nice and tidy, right? Export files are controlled via configurations. That's what I was talking about. Files are checked into the vault after export of the files. So if unique static folders and file names are used, files will be versioned again, right? So you got to make sure that you have unique static information defined in your file structure, right? So the name of the files, the folder information, if you're creating generated subfolders, all that stuff, if it stays unique, you can have that be done that way, right? Files can have PDM revisions set via workflow transitions, but once again, it does not populate back to the project, okay? One other thing we get with this in our export controls, we can map properties from SOLIDWORKS Electrical to be pushed to variables inside of PDM to fill out the data cards, right? So in your project, you can have your data card managed, right? So there's the show card option right here. You can have your data card filled out with the properties from your project, okay? So that is an option that's available there. Likewise, one of the other exports you get is a bill of material inside of the PDM vault, okay? And that's awesome. Checked out projects is flagged, right? Once again, username must be the same user to check it in. So if you're using a, multi-user client-server environment, whoever checked out the project must check it back in. Let's see an example of what you get when you check it in this time. Right, so in this setup, I get my DWGs put in via book. So each book has its own subfolder. Then I have a bill of materials. I have the PDF. And I have the project archive. And this happened to be one that I used the same name, so it duplicated the projects. But one of the things you get with the project archive, you get a filled out bill of material. And it's going to list out all of the virtual documents for that file, right? So it's going to build out that bill of material for you, give you quantities based off that information, and it's available there for you. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the bill of material is hard-coded. Unfortunately, we cannot change that, but you do get that information in here, okay? One other thing to mention with this that I didn't put on this slide is you can generate templates within PDM also, right? So I can set up my PDM to have project templates built into it. So if we bring over my electrical vault here, so if I right click here and go to new electrical project, I've got an option to start my schematic. I even went as far as to set up an Excel automation one. This one I think is pretty cool. This is like an advanced topic, right? So I come in here, I can add in the topic, right? right? And I can come in here, say project name, right? And I can say, you know what? Yes, I want tank filling. No, I don't want irrigation systems. Yes, I want hydraulic drawing. I'm going to use an ANSI template, right? I'll click OK. It's going to process this, and it's going to use information from PDM to help fill out the information I need already, right? So it's going to create the Excel file for the Excel automation side of things. It's going to give me the ability to have the file name for the Excel automation. It's going to fill in all that for me. It's going to define a project number for it, right? So if I say create file, there's the project, here's the zip file. It's going to give me the same option there. We're going to create the file. So it created my template, or used my template to create that for me, right? And then it also gave me my Excel spreadsheet that I need. So if I look at this one, all easier to see if I go to detail view, right? That's the one I've got. There's my Excel automation, and then there's my project. So one thing, because I use this as a template this way, is I would have to open it up in SOLIDWORKS Electrical via my commands, right? My PDM commands. Right? So if I bring over my SOLIDWORKS Electrical over here, come to SOLIDWORKS PDM, I'm going to do the checkout from here. I'm not going to use my project manager, right? Normal, typical workflow for most people is they're going to use the unarchive button here. Do not do that. We don't use that one. We come to the SOLIDWORKS PDM. We do checkout. All right. Please open a project before checking it out. So I got to say, hey, open. Right. And now it's going to bring up my vault view. So if I go to my projects, come grab the one I just created. Right. Open that up. We'll grab my project. We'll open that one up. Now it's going to restore it, unarchive it basically for me, bring it to into my PDM vault, or into my electrical project manager, I should say. It's going to run through, create that for me, right? And it's my base project. Because I did this with Excel automation, I can come in here and say, you know what, grab my Excel automation too. We'll open that up. Now, if you haven't explored Excel automation, it's wonderful. It's great for repeat commands that are, or repeat projects that are configured, right? So if you can give me a pic of that for me, right? So it created this, updated all of this with my macros. Got it all in here for me, right? So it created all these drawings, gave me everything, outputs, and there's even a P&ID with my hydraulics and pneumatics, okay? So all that's there. And in this case, if I come back to my SOLIDWORKS PDM, right, we'll go ahead and say check in this project, and we'll check it in and get everything in there for me. All right. So during the check-in process, we have the ability to add these. So we'll go ahead and say add, and we'll get this all checked in. Now, it does take a little bit of time, but it is doing some automated tasks for you, right? It is generating that PDF for you. It's exporting the DWGs for you. It's creating the bill of material inside of PDM for you. So it closed it, and it's going to ask if we want to reopen it. I'm going to say no for now. So it's going to continue exporting. So it creates the archive, closes it, closes the project, creates the archive, opens up the project again, exports the DWGs, exports the PDF, and exports the bill of material. Okay. Once again, here's all of our objects to be checked in. All right, so there's everything. We can call this add description or add a comment to it. Now it is saying, hey, these missing parts. And what that's going to do is say, hey, you're going to not get these parts in your bill of material. That's what it's giving me. But I'll just say continue. So in that case, I'd have to go back, save that log out, take a screenshot, whatever it is, make sure those parts are part of my library that is going to be checked in to my PDM vault, right? In part of my synchronization. So with that, that is our options for PDM integration for SOLIDWORKS Electrical. If you have any other further content or questions, or if you'd like further information in regards to SOLIDWORKS Electrical, please definitely check out our website, 3ds.com, and then check out SOLIDWORKS Electrical. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.